Hey there, welcome to the Xennial Mindset Show. I'm Marie Mack, born in 1983.
And I'm Anne Marie Pasquino from the crew of 1977. Together, our mission is to unravel the intricate layers of the Xennial mindset, where cherished memories of cassette tapes and rotary phones seamlessly coexist with cutting-edge technology and social media frenzy.
We'll also have some awesome guest Xennials dropping by, bringing their own stories and insights to the table.
So, whether you're a fellow Xennial craving a trip down memory lane, or just curious to know what the Xennial mindset is all about, stick around.
The Xennial Mindset Show is your backstage pass to our world where nostalgia meets innovation. Let's get started. Little feathers about life skills that Xennials have, and how, I don't know, are we going to be bold and say that they're better than other generations? I think so. I think we should. Anne Marie, does that make you feel?
Absolutely.
So today we're going to talk all about life skills and how we want to pass them down, which I think is very, not only to kids, like I think passed down, I think to kids, but I also think passed down as like the people that we interact with or our other family members or business colleagues. And like, there's so many different things where we pass down skills or share skills. So we're going to talk through it today. There are all types of different skills that we're going to go through, but if there's something we don't mention, please put it in the comments because we would love to open up that conversation and hear from you because there might be a life skill that we just don't touch on, which is completely true. First thing is financial literacy and practical money management. Anne Marie, I know that you feel very strongly about this one. You want to tell me about it?
I do. And, I feel like we're repeating the same thing on every episode that we do. And we talk about our upbringing. And I think financial literacy and money management is something for me that I learned growing up from my parents, right? From my grandparents who immigrated from Italy to Canada and how it was so important for them to save and how I look at my dad and, he saved for retirement. So being able to put money aside and learning that at a young age was a big part of my upbringing and really important for me. And that kind of carries on in my everyday life today, right? So, whether I own a home or I have investments and I'm thinking of retirement and I'm putting money aside for vacations and budgeting and things like that are all really, really important for me. And, if I think back at, when I was a teenager, I remember my first financial responsibility was I wanted to have my own phone in my room, my own private line, which was connected to.
Was it one of those lines that had like the big,
yeah,
like the
absolutely.
one that you would like get caught all over the place when you're like trying to walk around the room?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. With the answering machine that was plugged into it, that I recorded and had like my 90s, dance music in the background. But that for me, my dad's like, no problem, you can have that, but you're going to pay for it. You're going to be financially responsible for that. So at a young age, it was like, okay, great. And I can't remember what that amount was, but I had to make sure that, I was able to pay that bill every month. So that was starting to teach me financial money management, whatever you want to call it. So that was really important for me. I think today, it's changed a lot, and not because I'm not going to say it's all on, today's generation, but I also think there's, a lot of parents have paid for their kids' stuff. And, I always give people advice when they're coming to me and say, hey, we're getting married. And I'm like, I'm going to give you the best advice ever. Figure out your financials, make sure that you're in alignment, make sure that you agree, because that is the one thing that will make or break you. And so I think that that's really, really important. So, what are your thoughts? You have children, how do you teach them financial literacy and money management?
Well, it's interesting. Like we are on two spectrums of the Xennials, right? Like I lean a little more towards the millennial side of things. And one of the things that is current in my life is like owning a home. Like owning a home to me, it doesn't mean that I am wealthy. Like I feel like I would rather spend my time in budgeting around travel or around experiences for my family. I lean a little bit more towards the whimsical of the millennial side, which to me just means like I'm still aware of where my money is. We still budget. We still have all of those things. And we're very attuned to what is happening in the future to plan for. But I'm less so about like putting away for retirement. And I'm less so about like, oh, I have an investment property over here, right? Like it just is interesting, even the little leans that we have inside of the Xennial space. Definitely with kids, there's a lot to say about passing down money management skills. I can't speak really for like that middle generation between, you know, me as a Xennial and my kids who I think we decided, I know we pour into our children a lot on like responsibilities and what has to happen for taking things into consideration. Like they can't ask for something and the answer is yes. Like financially, that just doesn't happen. And we tell them like, hey, we're going on this big trip and we're saving for that big trip. So the answer is no to these other little things. At the same time, it's like my husband doesn't feel, I say my husband because this is one of those conversations in a marriage. You're like, we have to have this conversation out there. Like, he's like, it's not their responsibility to pay for their phone. And I'm like, it is a responsibility. They should have to pay for their phone. So I lost the battle though, and they don't pay for their phones. Like they do have them. Well, one of us, our kids, anyway, it doesn't matter. So it's like it's not a requirement for them to pay for their phone. Now, we in a society currently lean heavily on being able to connect with people. Like when we were kids, you could go drive anywhere. Like when I got my driver's license, my mom couldn't track me on her cell phone to know where I was at all times. I would have to call from a friend's house, possibly. You know, like when I'm in college, I wasn't like showing up everywhere and texting her. It was very much so like, hey, I'd call you when I got there. I'll check in, you know, in a couple hours. Like you didn't have this constant connection to people, where I feel like our society now has this constant connection to people. Like I want to track where my kids are and I can't. Like if my son is out at wherever, I can see where that is because he has his phone. And I pay for that, I'll say luxury, because I pay for his phone. I can also pay for all of the things that are in there. So truly, I have really a lot of control on what he's doing. It's just an interesting difference, I think, shift in society. Now, we budget. My daughter is killer at creating a food budget, a food plan, and what are we going to do for this? And that's important. She's 12. So the fact that she can budget her money for food and can go out and buy things and understand when she pulls something down from the aisle, like this is that price and this is that price, and making choices, budgetary choices, not by, it's a financial choice, not necessarily like a want choice. And what things do we splurge on and what things do we not? So those things kind of have trickled down to my kids. Now I'll say, we're homeschool parents, so our kids are we just do life differently than other people, you know, budgetarily. And like, if we're talking about passing down things to other people, like we also are in business and we train and we're business strategists for others. Mm-hmm. So I do this often where I'll create a budget plan for somebody and say, you have to track this. Like I helped a new business get started last week. And in that space, I'm like, here's your P&L. It's a spreadsheet, like very simple. You can be a solopreneur and do this, but they might not have had that education because it's not a part of their world before. So I think it's more, it's not only kids passed down, but then other people who need to think about those financial and budgetary things often. So I love all of this. And I hope that other Xennials out there are using this like ingrainedness inside of them to pass it down and make sure people are staying top of mind. I know so many people who have put themselves in a really bad situation financially just because they couldn't plan and they didn't have that forethought to like think through it all. So anything else on that?
I feel like we could have a whole podcast.
We just keep talking about
that. Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to go back to your earlier point about us both being Xennials, but being at the opposite end of the spectrum. And it's funny that you say that because I met with my financial advisor last week and I'm coming up to the 5-0, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, it's only now that I'm realized, oh my God, like I do have to plan for retirement. I do have to have this plan if I want to continue to live the lifestyle that I'm living, right? So I think, it depends on where you are in your life, but I do think that, I think money management and financial planning is really, really important. If you can pass that down to your kids and the people, around you, then I think that is a great skill to pass down. One of the things that we were talking about is, if you're passing it down to your children, is teach them the value of delayed gratification, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is important. Make intentional purchases. And I did as a kid, and I still do today. My husband's probably the opposite. He's the one that does the impulse buys, but that's why it works. But I think that's really important. And I think if you start to teach your kids some of that, then they'll have that value as they get older.
Yeah. And I think that's like that point right there kind of goes into our next life skill thought of critical thinking and information. We are in an age where you can find information, good information, bad information, whatever you want to find, you could probably find a support for it online. And analyzing what that looks like, critical thinking overall. I think I am very critical of the information that I see and who brings it to me and what their lean is. Almost everything that comes to me, I understand and assume it's got somebody else's opinion on it, whether that's digital, whether that's, physical media, like a magazine or newspaper or something. Like, I'm always assuming that this whole thing is actually somebody else's thought. And I'm not sure if that is really in some other generations. Like, I do not blindly believe anybody at all, nor do I pass that down to my kids. And thankfully, my kids are in a school learning environment where they're taught to analyze and critique. And how do we figure out what is true, especially online, but from other ideas as well? Like, if they hear, we're in a space right now of politicians and like election, like all of those things, like what is real and how much can we trust people with the information they say? Actions to me speak louder than words do. So I'm very huge on that. And all of that just kind of comes in with like critical thinking a little bit more. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I can't agree more. Like, I think for us growing up, at least I know for me, if I wanted to fact check something, I was opening up an encyclopedia, right? Yes. And, that's the access to information that I had. I do think, street smart, book smart, I think having a combination of those are great qualities to have. But I can't agree with you more. Critical thinking is, fact check, look it up. We have access to so much information. I know that when I'm having conversations, even with my dad, who's over 70 now, and we don't know the answer to something, he's like, Google it. It's like, Google it. And even when I Google it, I'm looking at what are the sources, right? Where are these sources coming from? And you're absolutely right. There is so much information out there, and we live in a society that is overshadowed and controlled by, the media and lots of people. And that's a conversation for another day. But I think it's really, really important to think through, all of the information that we're getting, right? What's fiction? And, even with AI, that is another, like AI.
Oh, it's crazy town. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard something the other day. I was in one of the newsletters that I got, and somebody was saying that Gary Vee had said that very near future, and I don't know, maybe it's a couple years from now or whatever, that most of our influencers will be AI influencers. Like, companies will be able to create entire fictional people who influence the way that you buy. And nobody knows if they're real or not. And that's just crazy to me because, there's a lot of intuition that I bring to like the critical thinking part. That's why I'm almost always on like a virtual call with somebody with a video camera, because intuitively I want to see them. I want to see how they're acting to things. And you can't always get that if somebody else is a fictional character who looks real and is saying exactly what is inputted into the system. Like, it just breaks my brain to think that that is what our children and the next generation are going to have to deal with. Not only are they going to have to figure out if the facts are true, they're going to have to figure out if the person is actually real. Like, that just blows my mind. And it'll be very interesting that as Xennials, that we continue to pass down that healthy level of skepticism in order to not only protect, but to also make sure that we're supporting the things that are important to us. Like whatever your stand is, whatever's important to you, like that's the thing that we need to keep fighting for. Like it's always been important to me to have the national parks up and running and a part of our world, and that they're protected and that we visit them and that we share them. Like that's a big thing for me as a person. If I don't do that, nobody else is going to stand up for it, you know? And so I think there's just this place to make a stand, but I don't even have any words for it because it's just so kind of crazy and so contrary to what happened in like our childhood. Like it's so far away. Like we didn't even have the internet back in the day, like and now we're worried about people not even being real.
Yeah. And I think, as we're talking about critical thinking and information, it's not only a skill that we want to pass down. Like if I look at, my dad and the older generation, like they are people who believe everything they see or hear, right? So what is the message we want to get out? We want people, to question, to ask questions, right? We want people to do their research. We want people to, look at what's out there, whether it's AI, like it's not simple. Hey, what color is the sky? What color is the sky? Like, even if you're using AI, right? Like prompt it, ask it questions, do your research, and then, from there, make your decision, right? So I think that flows really nicely into our next skill. This one is a big one for me. Communication, face-to-face versus digital. I think, we're in a world today that is, because of the phones, people text, it's just messages. We have communication platforms. From a business perspective, we communicate on Slack, on WhatsApp, and then we have text messages for friends and family. And I think that communication for me, and I'd love to hear how you feel, is face-to-face. If you want to have a conversation with me, I want to have it face-to-face. I get on calls all day, every day, this, Marie, and talk to people. And I don't do it over the phone. I do it over Zoom because I want to see people's faces, because I want to read and see how they're feeling, right? It also allows for me to create, establish and create a relationship with them, right? Which I think is really, really important. I feel like when people text, it is, you're reading it how you want to interpret it. And I think that that's really, really hard. I do think that there is a place for digital communication, but I think for me in my world, it's like, hey, I'll meet you at the mall, or hey, I'm going to be 5 minutes late, or hey, good morning. Just wanted to say good morning to you. But I'd love to get your thoughts on communication skills.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because both of our businesses are very digital, and it allows us to reach people all over the world, which I think is amazing. As like this business, the businesses that we own, like could not have been a reality in the 90s when we were growing up, or like during, in Xennial space of early 80s. Like it just wasn't possible. So we have this ability now to reach way more people. But we've also given so many other tools to be able to have that face-to-face, even though we don't see them. Like you and I have never met in person, but we talk on Zoom with video on all of the time. Even now, like we're recording an audio, but we're still talking with video on because I want to see what your reactions are. And I think that that's really important. We also have FaceTime that goes up all the time. So people are, I think, tapping into those communication needs. I know that when topics are difficult for me, like if I'm having an argument with my husband, for example, I feel like I showcase all of my emotions very quickly on my face. And so he'll say something and I'll be like, I don't know. And I don't really mean it. I just need like processing time. And so it's almost easier for me to have a good communication with him through text message because I can just like think about what I need to say and like process it in my own way to be like, okay, is that what I really feel, or is it just emotion that's coming out? So it's interesting that I use both tools consistently. What I will say is that I think good communication is about response time. I like having a quick response as much as possible. I also allow for a delay if it feels adequate, but if something's important to me, I would never not respond, right? I'd be like, hey, I'm thinking about it. I'll return back to you. Or, oh, you asked me about this meeting coming up. I need to check my calendar. Can you give me a little bit longer to take a look? Whatever it is. But communicating in general is something that happens often. I think when people just ignore a reply or a text, like that's what gets annoying. My cousin's like that. She's 25, so I don't even know what place that puts her in. But she's like, oh, I saw it. Yeah, I just didn't reply at all. And I'm just like, well, either you're going to come out with drinks, have drinks with me, or you're not. Like, this is something you can choose right now. Like, you don't have to wait to say yay or nay. Like, either you're busy or not. So communication is a huge skill. And I think that's something that we have to demonstrate to a younger generation. Like my son is very much so the person who would stay in his room and not get on video and not talk to anybody. And it's difficult. So I have to push them out when we're out in the world. Like, hey, will you go ask that man over there where the whatever is? Like if we're in a grocery store or, within safety reasons, like, hey, can you walk over here and do this and do that? And I'll give them and require them to go out and be confident enough to say and ask questions to people face to face, because it's not something that happens all of the time, especially because they're homeschooled and they're in a digital school. So I have to create opportunities for them to have face-to-face conversations. So it's harder. I think it's much harder. Like my son, 100% would never need to talk to anybody. Still probably be a very successful person. Like he can go to school virtually. He can go to college virtually. He can get a job virtually. He'll probably never have to see anybody, which is just crazy town. But that's the truth.
Yeah. I just want to go back to when you were talking about using both forms of communication, where you said, text message and in person. It's funny that you said that, because I am a face-to-face person, but if I have to write down something and take the time, I'm not going to use text. I'm going to use paper and pen. And and for those of you who cannot see Marie's face, but she just made a face.
Really?
Yeah. But for me, it's more about that, writing those words down on a piece of paper, because that's how we did it when we grew up, right? We wrote things on pieces of paper. The other thing, I think, when we do text messages or even written, whatever it is, I think for me, what's really important is saying hello, being respectful, thank you, using, whether I'm interacting with somebody face to face. I remember going into the office every day and I'd be like, hey, can you do this for me? And I'd be like, hey, good morning. How are you? How's your evening? And I think that goes a really long way. Just taking the time to be kind, respectful, thinking about how you're writing something, if you are using digital as a communication skill, and how the person's going to interpret it. So, it's always good to, hey, read your message, reread it, and then send it out, and like you said, some responses may require more time. Some will be answered right away, but it's very easy for people to react, right, when they're reading something, or misunderstand something. So I think as much as possible, I would tell the world, continue face-to-face. There is nothing like face-to-face, and use digital. And the other thing too is, like, I hate when I'm having a conversation with somebody and they have their phone in their hands and they're looking at their phone. There's nothing that bothers me more than that.
Yeah.
Right. So just be mindful of that.
Yep. Agreed. Kind of keeping us moving in the conversation. Like our next topic is around ethics in general, but work ethics, flexibility, adaptability. This is the same kind of thing. I mean, we are in the business of communication. Like that's what we do. Like we talk to people. So it's really easy to see how communication and work all kind of come together. I think that as Xennials, we have a very healthy work ethic and flexibility and adaptability. Like all of these things are what I think makes us really good at our job. And that adaptability allows us to see new things like AI coming and say, how can we use it? Like, even we've given examples of that. Like, how do you use AI to be a better business person or a better communicator? Like, those things come naturally to us, I think, as they're coming in. And we're also, just pulling in all these different pieces. We're still very skeptical about what it's sending to me. Like, I am very aware that I'm talking to a digital AI, like it's talking to Alexa or something. But I think that there's something really important, that to be flexible in a ever-changing work environment, and this isn't going to change. Like, our society is on a certain momentum and path. Like, it's not like we're going to go back to slower times and like gardening in the back. It's just not going to happen. So we have to be able to be adaptable and always be confident enough to say, yes, I can learn something new. Like, you and I didn't start our business with AI. It became a part of our business because we're an adaptable society and we're an adaptable people. And I think there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And I think there are a lot of people who are like, I'm never going to use that, or they're going to come and eat our brains or something. I don't know. Like, there's so many things that I hear out there from people who I feel like are just scared about change. And that's really difficult to see when we are in a space of like, okay, this is something new. How can it serve and excel what we are doing in our business? So yeah, thoughts on work ethics?
Well, for me, work ethic is extremely important. I work with people who have the same work ethic. That is really important to me. And I choose not to work with people who don't have the same work ethic. As you were talking, one of the things that came to mind as we talked about all of these skills, whether it's flexibility, work ethic, communication, critical thinking, a lot of it goes down to our values. And we didn't talk about our values, but values are really important. What are your values as an individual, as your family? What is important to you? And remain true to your values. I think that is, extremely, extremely important. And that, complements and all the skills that we talked about today. So I think, I can't agree with you more. I think all of the things that we've been talking about, I experienced growing up and play a big role in what I think about today in terms of my communications, my work ethics, my flexibility, my critical thinking, my financial literacy skills. So take the time, think about it. And I think today the younger generation is in this world where things are just going so fast and they don't take the time to just sit back and relax and just say, okay, what is important to me and how can I do things differently? How can I challenge things? How can I research? How can I learn more about this? How can, so yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah. And it's still important. And there are probably a bazillion other life skills that we're not touching on, but just we're open up the conversation here. So I guess our invitation to the listeners is just let us know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are there other life skills that we didn't touch on that you would like to elevate? Just share with us, because I think we've hit on some pretty big ones. There are always more. And thank you. Every time we get on an episode, I learn something new about who you are, and I just appreciate your openness in it. And I'm glad we speak the same kind of thoughts because of the Xennial side, but it's still good to hear your passions in it. So I appreciate you, friend.
Thank you. I appreciate you, friend, and have a wonderful day.
All right.
Thanks,
talk to
everyone.
you guys later. Bye.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode of Xennial Mindset Show. We hope that you enjoy the deep dive into unique perspectives that defines our generation. A big shout out to our incredible guest Xennials who shared their stories and insights. If you want to stay connected and continue the conversation, please follow us on social media at the Xennial Mindset Show. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us. Join us again next week as we unpack even more captivating topics, unraveling the threads of the Xennial experience. Until then, this is Marie, Mack and Amp signing off. Keep embracing the Xennial mindset and remember, the best is yet to come.